Throughout this short video, the discussion of utilitarianism as an application to the use of torture to foil a terrorist plot in Amsterdam Centraal shall be discussed. Philosophers Mills and Bentham shall be outlined, and interviews of members of the Utrecht community will give their thoughts on the ethics of torture, presented by group members Giselle, Max, Alex, and Taylor. Utilitarianism is the moral philosophy school of thinking founded by Jeremy Bentham. It is concerned with maximising the value or utility for the greatest number. Bentham formulated his theory in his work titled An Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation, published in 1789, and regards the morality of actions as entirely dependent on consequences or results from human well-being. It follows the line of reasoning that we are all governed by feelings of pleasure and pain, and that they govern us in everything that we do. Such theory suggests that pleasure and happiness are intrinsically valuable, whilst pain and suffering are intrinsically not valuable, and that anything else only has value in creating happiness or preventing suffering. Bentham's highest principle of morality is the creation of the greatest good for the greatest number, achieved by maximising pleasure and minimising pain. Bentham's theory may require breaking some traditional moral rules to achieve such an outcome.
Whereas John Stuart Mill tried to save utilitarianism by recasting it as a more humane, less calculating doctrine, Mill revised Bentham's doctrine and theorised that we should maximise utility not case by case but in the long run, and over time respecting individual liberty will lead to the greatest human happiness. Mill tries to save utilitarianism from the basic notion that all preferences are equal, no matter how the pleasure is derived. He does this by distinguishing between higher and lower pleasures to assess the quality, not just the quantity or intention of our desires. He did this by proposing a simple test. Of two pleasures, if there be one to which all or most who have experience of both give a decided preference, irrespective of any feeling of moral obligation to prefer it, that is the desired pleasure.
The key question is morality a matter of counting lives and weighing costs and benefits, or are certain moral duties and human rights so fundamental that they rise above such calculations? In our presentation today, we will outline the concept of torture with respect to weighing costs and benefits from a utilitarian perspective.
Breaking news here, we have a developing story. We've just received information that in 48 hours, a bomb will detonate in Amsterdam Centraal, killing hundreds of people. We have a suspect in custody who will refuse to give information voluntarily. We're asking and appealing to the public, would you grant permission to torture the suspect if there is a 100% chance that they will give you the information to disarm the bomb?
No, I won't do it. I wouldn't do it. I mean, it's hard to be in that situation, and I don't know if I would respond the same if I was in this situation.
Yeah.
But I think I wouldn't do it because his life is not less worth than the other people.
No.
Okay. So...
Why wouldn't you torture them?
Because it's a human being, I don't know, like torture shouldn't be performed. So.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, like, I don't know. It's the same if I do it or I...
With somebody else?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wouldn't do it. I don't know. It's like, yeah, like 100 people are in risk, but fuck, it's...
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult question.
Yes. And why would you do it?
Because of the lives that could be saved, and one life doesn't amount up to the lives that can be saved. So it's a balancing game.
I would grant permission even though it's against the UN Declaration of Human Rights, because if there's 100% chance that you're going to save like 100 people from violating the rights of one, I would say that the consequences would outweigh the violation.
I would say it depends on the strength of torture. Like, is it mentally or is it physically? And one has to assure that the guy who's tortured is not like long-term tortured, that he has any disability afterwards or whatever. And then I would say, even if it's a bit ethically not correct, but I would say, depending on the amount of people that are in danger, that torture should be allowed, and that, or you should do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Why not?
because I don't believe in torture.
Why don't you believe in torture?
Because like you can't, if you're punishing a person for like terrorism, for example, then that is basically torture to the people who are going to be the victims of terrorism. Then the state can't do that as a punishment to say it's wrong.
In the same situation, would you grant permission to torture the suspect if there is a 50% chance that they will give you the information to disarm the bomb?
I would say, yeah, also yes, but maybe to a lower degree of torture.
Okay.
And maybe stop then after, I don't know, a certain point when you see, okay, maybe it won't get to the, that he says how to.
Well, Amsterdam Central is a big station, so if a bomb detonates there, I reckon there can be a lot of casualties. So yes, still I would. People don't even think about torturing if there's not enough evidence that the person might know something. So
it's definitely harder because you're not given. If there's not 100% chance, then you've just like committed a grave violation for potentially no reason, and that just gives an excuse for you to like abuse the power whenever you want. So I would probably say, if you were thinking about like utilitarianism, you would have to, I think you would still say that you would have to, because it would still be the violation of the rights of one person versus like the potential violation of 100. And there's like, looking at simple basic maths, that would probably be worth it.
Subject A was the most confident yes we received. He had focused on the consequences of the action and also made reference to the calculation of human lives that would be saved, thus adopting a utilitarian standpoint. This was highlighted by his answer for the 50% likelihood, as he emphasised the potential detriment to the public and hence the possibility of the greater good. Subject B also utilised a utilitarian approach, as she emphasised the weight of the consequences and what would amount to the greater good. Compared to Subject A, when asked the 50% scenario, she was more hesitant. This is because she turned to the potential grave violation of human rights, a more traditional moral perspective when the question became harder to answer. Subject B also extended her thoughts to the possibility of a long-term imbalance of good, as this may result in an abuse of power. This reflects a more Mills thinking style towards utilitarianism. However, she ultimately turned to a more calculative approach, like Subject A, to come to an answer of yes.
Subject C presented a very strong opposition to torture, raising the notion of human rights. Fundamental rights exist within a society, and when mentioning these rights, he highlighted the fact that it wouldn't matter if it was him or someone else performing the torture. He was very clear in his response, however, when discussing, he may have been conflicted by the limitations towards his approach.
Subject D gave strong consideration to the fact that there should be no long-term physical effects due to the torture. When asked the 50% scenario, he would give permission to torture, but emphasised that a lower form of torture would be needed, giving a certain recognition to protection of human rights. Similar to Subject B, Subject D was hesitant when there was no certainty of the beneficial consequences, and had turned to traditional morality to assist him towards a conclusion. The answer was also calculated to ensure that the greater good still outweighed the detrimental consequences. This response showed a strong lean towards the utilitarian approach, but with certain limitations.
Here, subject A firmly believes that a state cannot implement suffering to the extent of torture where they would disallow suffering to such an extent to humans otherwise. This is much more of a social perspective towards the question, as a state endorsing the mistreatment of humans is a traditional moral wrongdoing. Her answer indicates that utilitarianism may lead to solutions that only focus on short-term greater good, rather than a moral high ground that may lead to greater good for society in the long term.
Subject F tackled the question from a very emotive perspective, saying that no life is worth less than others. He didn't acknowledge the hundreds of potential fatalities, instead focused on torture as an unacceptable method in any circumstance. Clearly, the utilitarian theory would not be adopted, as the actions undertaken to achieve such consequences are still subject to moral rules in Subject F's ideal society.
Our chosen theory of social justice, namely utilitarianism, has received mixed responses from our interaction with the local Utrecht community. We found that there was no coherent response when asked whether torture was an appropriate action to take in order to save hundreds of lives. The diverse range of responses gave us a variety of opinions to work with and analyse.
Some of the subjects had objections to torture as a practice, as it violates fundamental human rights, while others followed the view that morality is a matter of counting lives and weighing costs and benefits, which is in line with the theories we discussed today.